Thank you, everybody, and welcome. This is going to be a great start to a great convention and a great week. We have a record convention this week, and tonight's guests are going to be a great part of it. American Airlines Chairman and CEO Tom Horton, and the former governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell. But before we get started, a few words from our generous sponsor.
Last Tuesday, I woke up, I pulled back the duvet, I did some exercise, had a shower, and then while I ate my breakfast, I did a few emails, read the paper online, and then settled back into my seat for a very comfortable landing on the Airbus A380 I was traveling into Dubai. Now, fortunately for all the other passengers who are around me, I do not sleep naked. But seriously, you think back 10 or 15 years, who'd have thought that we'd be showering on board aircraft? And it's all part of a quiet revolution which is going on within the travel industry. And technology is changing so many industries. Take publishing, for example, iBooks, e-readers, Kindle. It's really turned that whole industry upside down. Video. Do you remember the pop song from the 70s, Video Killed the Radio Star? Then Blockbuster was enormous. Then Netflix came along. And now TiVos and PVRs are challenging that business model. And of course, social media like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube are really changing the way we communicate with each other and the way businesses are reaching out to consumers. So we've got to adapt. We have to adapt to a whole new dynamic. And we, on the supplier side, need to find new ways of generating revenue. All of us need to innovate. If you don't innovate, or you're not a very quick follower of innovators, then you will fail. By the way, welcome to Boston, one of my favorite cities, absolutely fabulous place, and not just because the Guinness that they serve here is the best this side of the Atlantic, that's for sure. I have a lot of personal experience, I can tell you. And actually last October, my wife and I decided to bring our 3 children down to Boston to see the beautiful New England colors. So my wife went online, she booked a trip, it's about $2,000, and then we went to the airport, all was good, and then the fees started. $150 for additional baggage fees, we paid $50 for a sandwich on board for each of us, hook up to the internet, the Wi-Fi on board, another $30, the fees just kept mounting up. Actually, when I got back at the end of the trip to scramble around my credit card statements and found out the trip cost me 15% more than what we'd originally budgeted when we booked online, 15%. I actually asked the GBTA, today in this room, what's the total travel spend of the people attending this conference? And they told me it's about $113 billion. So you can imagine 5%, let alone 15%, what that looks like on travel spend your size. And just to give you some relativity, those fees, those ancillary fees in 2009 amounted to about $8 billion. In 2011, it was over $32 billion. So you add that to average ticket prices, which are increasing about 3 times the rate of inflation in the US, and that gives a big challenge to many people in this room. So what you need is better data and better tools. And that's one of the reasons why JP Chase has formed a long-term partnership with AirPlus International, a phenomenal European issuer, to bring value to all of you and, for example, provide you with customized reporting which breaks out those fees and gives you real transparency and allows you to get your arms around what's an ever-increasing issue for you. Talking about innovation, I mentioned innovation a couple of minutes ago. Think of things and industries which are really, really innovative. So high-definition television. I mean, it's absolutely amazing what's happened in that industry. In fact, when I was in the hotel earlier before coming to the convention, I was watching the British Open, you know, the golf, and you actually feel like you're at the course. NEL's won, by the way, for those of you who are interested. Very exciting. There's a South African over there, obviously. But it really feels like you're at the course. It's an incredibly clear quality and high value product. I don't think anybody can do a presentation these days without mentioning the A word, Apple. I mean, Apple have done a phenomenal job. It's not necessarily that they have the best products in the marketplace, but they've certainly brought the easiest products to use into the market. And they've integrated it really well with the iTunes platform. My favorite example of an innovative industry is the bottled water industry. So when I was a kid growing up in the 70s in Liverpool, England, where I'm from, I used to play a lot of football, or soccer, as you call it here. Now, I'm not going to get into a sort of transatlantic argument about which term is the correct one, but I will say two things. One, we invented the game. And second, we call it football because you kick the ball with your foot, as opposed to carry it under your arm and throw it. But anyway, that's a different matter. The Brits are like that one in the room, I'm sure. But I used to come back from playing soccer with my buddies in the park and say to my mum, "Look, Mum, I'm really thirsty. What have you got to drink?" And she'd point at the tap or the faucet and say, "Put your bottom lip under that and you can have all you want." Nowadays, my kids come home when they've been out exercising and they say, "We want vitamin water." Vitamin water. I mean, it is just crazy. Take one plastic bottle, fill it with water, add a vitamin or two, I guess, bit of flavoring, bit of coloring, put it on supermarket shelves, and put a $5 price on it. And we are buying it. We're all buying it by the caseloads. That's an example of true innovation. It really is. Now, when you think of innovation, the two words corporate card don't spring to most people's minds. Unfortunately, I don't think they do. But we in JP Morgan have been looking at this a little bit differently. I think there's a lot of people out there who believe that the holy grail of corporate cards is having one solution which is applicable and works right across the world. We actually don't subscribe in JP Morgan and AirPlus to that one-size-fits-all solution. We actually think you can get the best of both worlds. So yes, you need data and reporting which is integrated globally, but we believe that needs to be complemented by first-class local servicing. So whether it's lodge card products in China, it's reporting on your carbon emissions, or it's breaking out ancillary fees in the US like I just described, come and talk to us. We'd really love to see you. We're at booth 2506, 2506, and tomorrow at 4:30 in the afternoon, Patrick Diemer, the chairman of AirPlus International, and myself will be celebrating our new partnership with a champagne toast. And if there's any Irish in the crowd, we may smuggle in a little bit of Guinness as well to liven the event up. So enjoy your convention, enjoy the beautiful city of Boston, and I will now pass you back to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, very much. I'd like to bring out, and we're honored to have our first guest, the CEO and Chairman of American Airlines, Mr. Tom Horton. Good to see you. Have a seat. Well, let's get right to it. You've obviously been in the news quite a bit lately. Even your breakfast meetings get picked up in USA Today, which is pretty amazing.
I noticed that. That was rather invasive.
It was. So just to get started, why don't you give us an update on the restructuring?
Well, we're about 8 months into our restructuring now, and the company has been making some very good progress. I think the results really speak for themselves. And you know, the day I got the battlefield promotion into my current job, I got our team together and I said, you know, we have two objectives this upcoming year. And I'm a simple guy, so I need to keep it very simple. And the two objectives were, first, run a first-rate airline. And second, execute a successful restructuring, do it right and do it once. And that's what we've been all about. And in terms of running the company, it's really been running quite well. We just posted our second quarter results. We had our first second quarter profit in 5 years. Our revenue performance has been beating the industry in every month of the second quarter. We had record revenues and record load factors in the second quarter. And what's been really inspiring to me is that our people have just been doing such a fantastic job for our customers. And in fact, all of our operating metrics, the things we measure, are the best they have been in many years. On-time dependability, baggage handling, maintenance delays and cancellations, those sorts of things. And all of our customer survey data is moving north. So the people of American have really been standing tall, and that's been inspiring, I think, for all of us at American to see. And so we move forward from here.
What can we expect in the next few months?
Well, more of the same. We're going to keep progressing on our restructuring. We've now gotten the last of our tentative agreements with the labor unions. On Friday, we made a tentative agreement with our flight attendants union, and several of those agreements have been ratified. We have a few more to be ratified, and I'm hopeful that they will. And as they do, we'll then progress to put together our plan of reorganization and exit.
So American chose not to file for bankruptcy when really most of the other airlines, major airlines, did after 9/11. What was the decision? What was behind that decision not to file earlier, and which led you to filing now?
Well, I think, Mike, we try not to look back and second guess that decision. I think it's obvious to all of us in this room, the last decade was extraordinary and very difficult in the airline industry. It was a decade in which all of our big competitors went through restructuring once, if not more than once. And American fought that longer and harder than anyone else did. I think it was honorable. I think the people of American should be proud of what they have done. But we're now, in the middle of it. The other guys got their costs down, they got their debt down, they restructured and became more successful. And we're going to go do that. And we're going to do it and make this company very successful and profitable.
So you became chairman and CEO November of 2011, same day as the filing. So how do you think your background prepared you for the challenges you're facing now?
Well, I'm not sure anything can prepare you for that. It's been a character-building experience. But I spent a little over 20 years with the company. I've had a lot of different jobs inside the company, and I know the company, its people well. And I've seen what works, and I've seen what doesn't work so well. And I spent a few years away from the industry, in the telecom industry, and that has given me kind of a fresh perspective and a different perspective on our industry when I came back. It's been helpful.
Yeah, we'll come back to that a little bit. So, but within American, I mean, how would you describe your management style compared to past American leaders? And there's certainly been some legendary ones in there. So, what makes you unique? What do you bring that you think maybe the others don't?
Well, that's a good question. American's unique in that it's a company with an 80-year history, and it's only had a very few CEOs. And there have been some giants in that group. And it's an honor. It's an honor and a privilege to be leading this company, particularly at this very challenging time. I learned a lot from those who went before me. Right. And if you want to know what motivates me, I'm a pretty intense competitor. And I want to see this company as a winner again. And I view that as my job, and that's what we're going to go do.
So who had the biggest influence on you as a leader?
Well, I guess we are all a product of our background, our experiences, our family. You don't get to pick your parents. I have great ones, and I'm a product of that. I will tell you, I grew up in a very interesting place and time. I grew up in the 60s and 70s in the shadow of the Space Center down in Houston, where my father worked.
Right.
And I sort of got the bug, you know. It was a time when America was on offense, and that was no more evident anywhere else than in the space and aviation industry. And our neighbors were astronauts, and I just really, I was inspired by those people. And the people who inspired me most were the guys who were just extraordinarily accomplished and extraordinarily capable, but did it with such grace and humility. People like John Glenn and Neil Armstrong. Right. Those are the people I look to as just really great figures in America.
So were you one of those, you know, 5-year-old kids running around in an astronaut suit?
I absolutely was one of those guys.
Okay, that's good. So one of the lines that I've heard you say, or that you have said to employees, is that you said you feel almost as patriotic towards American the airline as you do towards America the country. Is that true?
It is true. I say that I feel about America the way I feel about America. There is no option but success here, and we're going to make this company successful. I mean, this is a company that flies our flag around the world. It is, in many senses, America's flag carrier, and I think that brings a great duty and obligation to us to make it successful and to make sure that our products and our services are very much world class in every way.
So you started with American in '85, and you left in 2002, and you became, like you said, you went to telecom, you became the CFO of AT&T. So why did you leave? You were there 20 years. This is a company you love. What made you leave?
Yeah, I had been there 20 years. I had done many, many different jobs and had great experiences. And I was approached by AT&T to come and help at a transition of, you know, a great American icon. And it was a very complex transition. I was approached by a guy named Dave Dorman, who was going to run AT&T at the time. I knew him well. He's a very good salesman, and he convinced me to join him in that endeavor. And it was a challenging time. But I tell you, it was really energizing for me to jump into something completely different and learn a very different industry. I mean, I tell you, I was drinking from a fire hose. I didn't know a megabit from a petabyte. I just didn't know what these things were. But I learned a lot, and it was great. And I tell you, I think it is great to get out and just learn something very different. I think if you stay in one place too long, you can go a little loco. And I think we're seeing an example of that in our industry today.
Ah, interesting comment. Oh, we'll do a lot with that. Hey, hang on. I'm going to just tear up these cards. We'll do but then you came back.
I did.
You, in 2006, you came back. So what brought you back? Was it the American Airlines family? What was it?
It's a great company. All the things we just talked about. I do love the company. I do love the people of the company. And I had finished my assignment at AT&T. I was asked to come back by Gerard and the board. And it felt like the right time to come back. And you know, it was clear that American had been through an extraordinary time and needed to move forward. There was a lot of work to be done, and I thought that was a challenge very much worth being part of.
Because you were gone for like 4 years, was it a different airline when you returned? What did you find when you got back?
It was a different airline. You know, American had been through just an extraordinary time. You think about the early part of the decade and all the things that had happened. You think about a restructuring which turned out to be insufficient relative to what all of the other airlines had done.
Right.
And so it was a company that really needed, in my view, to be moving forward, you know, a bit of a kickstart to go forward.
How were things culturally? Because American was always used to being, and projected itself as being the leader, but then found itself in a very different position. Was that hard to come back to?
It was, and I tell you what, I never view American as anything but a leader, and so that's what our plan going forward is all about. We're going to return American to industry leadership, and it's going to happen, you know, beginning this year.
So let's fast forward to now, 2012. Sometimes often, really, when a company's restructuring, a lot of times an outsider is brought in to really steward the company through a restructuring process. It's not always, a lot of times the bondholders, shareholders are really looking for someone to come in, do a job, and then get through and then transition out. But you were promoted from within. You were someone from the inside. Why do you think that happened?
Yeah, I think the board, you'd have to ask the board, it was their decision. I think their sense was that because I knew the company and I knew the people of the company, I would bring a measure of stability at a very, very challenging time. But also because I'd been outside the company and worked on a very complex restructuring of another American icon, that I brought maybe a more independent point of view to the situation than maybe somebody else would.
So back to that change in perspective again, right?
Yeah.
That's good. So back to that breakfast. The breakfast I was referring to was the one, it was in USA Today. It was Doug Parker, the CEO of US Airways, and his old friend Tom here had a breakfast that ended up getting picked up. I have to really hit you with the very hard-hitting question that everyone's asking. So what'd you have, the oatmeal or the eggs? Which was it?
I had the oatmeal. I eat oatmeal every day. There really wasn't any news there.
Yeah, right. So a lot of press, a lot of speculation. Every analyst in the world has a perspective on whether more consolidation is needed in the airline industry. What do you say?
Well, I think consolidation has been tremendously helpful for the U.S. airline industry. I've long been a proponent of consolidation. Some have said American sat out the last cycle of consolidation. We didn't. We started it at the beginning of the decade with the TWA acquisition. Some of you may remember even a carve-up of US Airways at the time. So we are strongly in favor of consolidation. I do think there will be more in the industry. And I do think American will be carefully considering whether to participate in that. I'm convinced that with all the things we're doing inside the restructuring, the company is going to come out very strong and successful and profitable. The question in my mind is, could a combination make us even stronger and more successful? And that's what we're carefully vetting now.
But will that happen, or would that only happen in your mind after the restructuring is complete?
I don't think we can make that conclusion. I think the question will be, is there any reason why it would make sense to do inside of restructuring as opposed to what has been more traditional in the industry, which is to complete the restructuring and to come out the other side and complete a combination.
Okay. So at its peak, some would argue that American is really the airline of choice for business travelers. So what's the perception of American now, do you think? What do you think this audience thinks about American today when it comes to business travel?
I think people see a company in transition. I will tell you, we are very focused on building the new American for our customers and in particular for our business customers. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because I think it is important. So in our view, we think about what's important to our customers. What's important in particular to our business customers? Well, a great network, great alliance partners that can take you around the world, great products and services, a new fleet, and excellent people to deliver all of those things. So I want to spend just a second on each of those. Think about the network. Well, American, I think, has an excellent network. We have some of the best hubs in North America: New York, Chicago, LA, Dallas, Miami. Those are the biggest metro areas in the country and represent enormous populations of high-value customers. We have, I think, the best alliance partners in the world. Companies like British Airways, Cathay, Qantas, Japan Airlines, LAN. Those are really the premium brands of the world's airlines. And oneworld, by its nature, while it's not the biggest of the alliances, I think it is the best positioned for the business customers. We have more capacity in the top 50 business markets than the other two alliances, and I think that is emblematic of the power of the oneworld network. Products and services, we have many, many things going on. You're going to hear more about that tomorrow. We have a very exciting announcement on our narrow-body fleet and how we're going to configure those. We have 550 new airplanes on order. That is more than the rest of the legacy airlines combined. This is going to be a new a new airline. We take 30 new planes this year, 60 new planes next year, and we have enormous flexibility to take even more beyond that because of the options inherent in our airplane deal. So, think about what we're going to do. We've got new 777-300s coming this year. We've got 100 787s on order. We've got a bunch of narrow bodies on the way. We're going to reconfigure our existing wide-body airplanes, the 767-300s and the 777-200s, to have lay-flat business class seat with all-aisle access. So it's going to be a whole new fleet. Now, one other thing we're doing that we haven't talked a lot about, but I wanted to say a word about it here today, is because we have so many new airplanes on the way, and because we have so much momentum coming out of the restructuring with new products and services, we have been working for many, many months now on a modernization of the American Airlines brand. And there's some very exciting work that will be unveiled in the near future. But part of what that will involve is thinking about the look of our airplanes, the iconic American Airlines look. Well, the 787 is a composite airplane, so it can't be polished metal. And the Airbus airplanes have a lot of composite on them. So we've been thinking about what the new look of our airplanes will look like. And I think people are going to find that very interesting. So stay tuned on all of that.
So after all these years, a real change,
More
a
to
real
come.
visible change is coming
It is.
too. Well, okay. One of the things you shared with me, a look at a new advertising and video that's coming, and I found it very interesting. One of the things that was in that video was the mention back to the fleet about how American will have the youngest fleet in the skies of the major carriers.
Yeah.
And that will be after when? At what point do you feel?
Yeah, we're on a path to, around 5 years out, we'll have the youngest fleet in the industry. But each year, it will be getting dramatically younger, starting with next year when we take 60 new airplanes. And in fact, later this year, we'll take the first of the 777-300s, and we'll be the only airline in the U.S. operating that airplane, and it's going to be like nothing else.
Okay. So we'll be talking a lot about the future of America this week, but you're certainly in a unique position to tell us about the future of American. What's your vision for American's future?
To be nothing less than number one. Our view is American Airlines is America's flag carrier. And when we're done with this restructuring, it will be a profitable and growing enterprise. And it should represent the very best of America. I think, America invented the aviation industry. And yet, one could argue that America's airlines do not have the best products and services in the industry. Some of the other airlines I mentioned do. I don't think it should be that way. I think American, representing America, should have the very best the world has to offer. And I think that's our duty.
Any last words for all the buyers in the audience?
My last words would be thank you. Thank you for your business. We don't take it for granted. We appreciate each and every one of you. And I want to assure you that we're working very hard to create an airline that you'll all be very proud of.
Great last words. Thank you, Tom. Up next will be Governor Ed Rendell. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. Big round of applause. But before we bring out the governor, I want you all to take a look at this short video.
Ladies and gentlemen, for your viewing and listening pleasure, here is convention attendees say.
I wonder if I packed enough. How are you?
Great to see you again.
Good to see you. Denise? Hey, there's something in my teeth. That's the least of your worries.
Okay.
This one right
Okay.
here. So.
Okay. If I get anything?
No, you're good. How about me?
Oh, you look great.
Okay.
Can I get a wake-up call? Guys, want a drunk dial Mike McCormick?
No, wait.
Really?
Yeah, okay.
Hey, see you at the party tonight. Hey, see you at the party tonight. Party night, see ya.
It's gonna be fast.
No, not yours. Hey, party tonight. See ya.
Can I get a follow-up to that wake-up call?
$4.98, $4.99, $500. That ought to do it.
Maylena, want to drunk dial Mike McCormick?
Absolutely.
Can we have some air conditioning next time? What does it take?
Can I get a follow-up to the my wake-up call? Guys, let's drunk dial Mike McCormick.
Cool! Yes!
Hey, Maylena, it's Doug. Where are you? I can't find you anywhere.
I'm out on the balcony. Where are you?
Well, I'm out on the balcony
Hello?
too. Well, I
Hello?
don't see you.
Can't hear you.
I'm looking all over the place. Where are you?
Kevin, where are you? I'm trying to find you again.
I'm here on the escalator somewhere. Where are you?
I can't believe I voted for that guy. Actually, if you remember, you had no choice.
Man, my feet are killing me. My feet are killing me.
Oh, mine are too.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Governor Ed Rendell. Thank you so much for coming. This is a bit of a personal honor of mine, too, because we just heard Tom Horton talk about restructuring a major airline, but you were mayor of Philadelphia in 1992, and it was a time when, I don't know, do any of you remember Rosenbluth travel? Well, yeah. I was working for Hal Rosenbluth, and we were in the city of Philadelphia at the time. And the city was in such bad shape, we were at the point where we were literally looking at leaving the city, as were a number of businesses. We had gone so far as to start to look for campuses outside Philadelphia, and it was a very, very difficult time. You got elected mayor, and you and some of your team talked us and many other businesses into taking a chance and staying in. And, but that city at that time was literally in tough shape when you came in. So how bad was it? And how did you fix it?
Well, Philadelphia at that point had the highest budget deficit and percentage of revenue of any city in America's history. But worse than that, it had tried to combat that problem by raising taxes 18 times in the 11 years before I became mayor, obviously to no avail. Services frankly sucked. People were fed up, and the city had lost any iota of hope. People were just looking to get out, businesses and people themselves looking to move out. We knew we had to act fast. We knew we had to create a new dynamic, so we did a number of things all at once. Number one, we knew we had to get control of that deficit, and we couldn't do it by raising taxes. So we went after every nickel of waste in the budget. We went after everything that could increase the productivity of our workforce in the entire city operation. Then we restructured our benefits and our work rules in a way that saved literally hundreds of millions of dollars. It was a very contentious battle. There was a lot of open warfare during the first 6 months that I was mayor. The union went on strike. It was a short-lived strike because we had gone to the people and said, look, here's what we got to do. Here's the benefits they have. Compare them to your benefits. For example, our workers got 14 paid holidays. That's not vacation, that's paid holidays. I used to tell people as I went around the city, for the emotional distress of being away from their families on Flag Day, our police, firemen, and prison guards got paid double time, because that's where you really got hurt, because the city workers that had to work on those vacation days got double time. It cost us $7 million for every day. When the new contract came in, we had 9 vacation days. We cut 5, saved $35 million. So we did all sorts of things like that. And at the same time, we invested in things that were visible. The swimming pools in the city had been virtually closed for 2 summers. And I raised money from the private sector, and we opened every one of those swimming pools on time. So we did things to raise the morale. We did the tough things that were necessary to get our budget under control. And then we did long-term things like begin a project called the Avenue of the Arts, which totally changed the dynamic of the city.
It really did too. You know, again, as a resident at that time. So, how do you inspire city workers, though? They're notoriously really, challenging people to motivate. Probably very set in their ways. How did you motivate them to change?
It's very hard because Philadelphia, like many American cities, has a civil service system. So the workers are basically protected. They have to use a shotgun and bash a few people over the head to lose their jobs. That's how tough the civil service system is. So what we did was, first we took the mid-level managers who nobody had ever talked to before, and we made them part of trying to find new ways to do things. It was amazing. When we talked to them, there were a flood of new ideas. It inspired them, and they were able to supervise in a stronger, more effective, and more passionate way. Secondly, with the workers, we started privatizing functions. Functions that the city workforce used to do, did inefficiently and did at a high cost. We would bid out, and we'd pick the leading private sector bid that saved us money. Then we'd always give the city workforce the chance to match that, to match the savings. Well, the first 15 or 20 times they didn't try. They sued us in court and lost. But finally, they started getting together and finding ways to save money on their own. And on the 3 biggest contracts that we had, the city workforce actually beat back the private bids by coming in under the private bids. So it was more motivation of self-preservation that got them going. And it's interesting. No one had ever talked to, I said we didn't talk to the mid-managers. No one had ever talked to the workers either. And the workers had a lot of great ideas.
So we're going to talk about your book. You're now an author. And, but before we talk about the book itself, I want to just talk a little bit about, kind of set the stage for how the book came about. Now, the governor, not only was he mayor and then governor, but while he was mayor and governor, he used to do post-game Eagles NFL Live commentary. He'd come on TV. And so I think you're the only one in history of someone to do that, right? I mean, I don't know of any other.
The Attorney General of Maryland, any of you are from the D.C. area, I think he now does the same thing for Comcast. But we went on, and it became so popular that we now have a pregame show as well as a postgame show. But it was no big deal. The first time I did it, after about 45 minutes, we took a break, and I thought to myself, they actually pay people to do this? You know, a bunch of men sitting around talking about football? You know?
It's a great gig. So, okay, December 26th, 2010, our beloved Eagles are playing the Minnesota Vikings, and something happened that day. The NFL stepped in and did something. What happened?
At 10 o'clock in the morning, the weather forecast was for an 11.5-inch blizzard to come sometime before or during the actual game, which was a 4 o'clock kickoff. And the NFL, before one drop of snow fell, canceled the game. They canceled the game. I couldn't believe it. I was home. I was really looking forward to the game because when I was a kid, the football game I remember most was in 1958, New York Giants versus Cleveland Browns. Giants needed to win the game to get into the playoffs, to force the Browns to play them in the playoffs. And they were 2 points down with 10 seconds to go. They had the ball at midfield. And it had been snowing all game long, and the wind was blowing, and it was unbelievable. It was almost blizzard conditions. And Pat Summerall, who most of you know as an announcer, stepped up and kicked a field goal from the 50-yard line. In those days, the goalposts were on the goal line, through the swirling snow and wind, and it was the most exciting thing I've ever seen. He split the uprights, and I can close my eyes and see that today. And I wanted to have another memory, and I wanted my son to have that memory, and I wanted our fans to have that memory. One of the few times the Eagles won the championship was in 1951. In a blizzard, ironically, 11-inch blizzard. They played the game, and Steve Van Buren, who was a running back then, the equivalent of Tom Brady, he was so popular, he took 2 trolleys and a bus, public transportation, to get to the game. Can you imagine an NFL player taking public transportation to get to the game today? And the Eagles won that game. So I thought they robbed us of an incredible experience, and I thought they violated one of the basic rules of football. You know, Tom Hanks said there's no crying in baseball in that great movie. Well, there's no canceling football games for bad weather. Anybody here from Cincinnati? San Diego? The Chargers and the Bengals played a game in the 70s, the AFC Championship game. It was 65 degrees below wind chill factor in that game. They played the game. They played the game. If you remember Oakland and New England, the Tuck Bowl, that game was played in a driving snowstorm. And I wondered, what would the people of Green Bay or Minneapolis or Pittsburgh or Buffalo think? We canceled a football game because of snow?
So you called into the post-game show,
Yeah,
and what did you say?
We didn't have a post-game show, but, they called us up,
Yep.
and I said, this is just a symbol of what's happening in this country. It's the wussification of America. And by the way, I don't think there's such a word as wussification, but I said we've become a nation of wusses, and there is a word in the dictionary. Wusses means someone who lacks the courage to do what they believe is right. And interestingly, a reporter for the Daily News the next day wrote a column beating up on the league for canceling the game, and he said if this was in China, 65,000 Chinese would have walked to the game doing advanced calculus as they walked to the game. And that comment was picked up, attributed to me, because I repeated it, picked up in newspapers in Beijing and Shanghai.
So his book, A Nation of Wusses. I think there's some great phrases in here. There's Nation of Wusses, wussification of America. I think you use all-star wuss, wussing out, wussified, and wuss no more.
And you know, the interesting thing, Mike, is I pivoted off it that day and said it's symptomatic of what we've become as a country. For example, if you live in the East, I don't know if this is true anywhere else, but when there's an inch and a half of snow, we cancel school. When I was a kid, an inch and a half of snow, no one would even consider it. That wouldn't have been an option. We cancel snow, and more importantly, our leaders have become the biggest wusses of all. They're afraid to do anything at all. Tom said in his interview with you something about doing big things and you know, going absorbing challenges. We don't do that anymore. We shy away from challenges because we're afraid. We're afraid of losing our jobs. We're afraid of how people might react, and most of all, we don't trust people. Politicians, leaders today don't believe that all of you can handle the truth. And it manifests itself in many ways, and we're going to go into this a little later on, but just let me give you one example. We Democrats, we don't believe that senior citizens can be talked to about reducing some entitlement benefits. We don't believe that a group of seniors, if they heard me say, look, when Medicare was passed into law, it was 1964, and the average life expectancy was 69 years of age. Today, if you reach 65, your average life expectancy is 87. Medicare was never meant to cover 2.5 decades of life. It was meant to cover the last 5 years. And it's great that we're living longer, but that means we have to change the program or it's going to go bankrupt. Don't you think that most seniors, not all, but most seniors would understand that? But nobody talks to anybody anymore. Nobody tells anybody the truth.
So you wrote in your book, we seem to have lost our boldness, our courage, our sense of adventure, that frontier spirit that made this country the greatest nation in the world. So how do we get that frontier spirit back?
Well, we need leadership. JFK said, it's interesting, Tom was talking about the space program. When the Russians orbited Sputnik, JFK said we're going to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade of the 60s. And we did. And he said, my favorite Kennedy quote is not all the glamorous ones, but he said, we do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And we always did. We were the ultimate risk takers. Just think about how this nation was formed. A bunch of farmers and shopkeepers thought that they could beat the greatest army and navy in the world at that time, the British Empire. We had one organized militia at the time we went to war, and that was Ben Franklin and the Associators in Philadelphia. No other organized militia, and we thought we could beat the greatest army and navy in the world. When we built the Erie Canal, people said it could never be done. Engineering-wise, it couldn't be done. If you saw the anniversary of the 75th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge, they said you can never build that bridge that high in the wind currents that go over the bay. But we did all those things, and we never looked back. And we were Americans, and there was no challenge strong enough or tough enough that we couldn't meet. And we've lost that feeling. And today I was on George Stephanopoulos' show in the morning, and we were talking about it, and I said it all boils down to leadership. And I don't blame the president. I think the president inherited a whole boatload of problems not of his own doing. I think he's done fairly well. But when Simpson Bowles came back, and the president got Simpson Bowles, which was his own commission, he should have led. Was the nation ready to hear that there had to be pain for seniors, that there had to be pain for those people who don't like seeing revenue raised and who are disciples of Grover Nordquist? Of course there'd have to be pain. But leadership is about, as JFK said, doing tough things. And the president took a pass. Now later on, with John Boehner, he came close to doing what was the equivalent of Simpson Bowles, and then Boehner and the Republicans in the Congress backed away. But no one's willing to lead. Everyone knows in Washington what has to be done. We've got to cut our spending, and we've got to raise revenue. You can't do it by just cutting spending alone, and you can't do it by raising revenue alone. We've got to do both. Everyone knows that, and yet they're all too afraid to vote it. And let me tell you, America is at, you hear people talk about the cliff. We're at the breaking point. Whether we'll maintain our status as the leading economic power in the world depends on us doing something very bold and putting that package together and doing $5, $6, $7, $10 trillion of debt reduction. And it just requires strong leadership from all of our leaders. They've got to stand together and do something and maybe risk their rear ends. I titled all my chapters. By the way, I do care if the book does well, but I had a great time writing it. The person who likes the book most of all is me. And I titled all my chapters, and I have wonderful titles. But the chapter I like the title best is Stand and Defend, There Are Some Things Worth Losing For. And I say in there, if you run for office and there's nothing you believe is important enough that you're going to risk your job getting it done, then don't run. You have to care about doing things and doing big things, not little nibbles at the edge, about changing the direction of the country, about helping literally millions of people get opportunity. And if you don't want to do that, it's not a business for you. I mean, these people who go to Washington and say government shouldn't do anything, well, if government shouldn't do anything, why'd you run for Congress? To sit there and get paid for not doing anything? I mean, it makes no sense. And if we don't meet these challenges, we are in trouble. And there's no secret that China is kicking our rear end in virtually everything.
So here we are in an election year, you're talking about leadership, you're talking about the challenges in Washington. So you've been a DA, a mayor, a governor. You were chair of the Democratic National Committee. So you have a lot of perspective, a lot of unique perspective, insight into this year. What's this election going to come down to in 2012?
Well, I think it's interesting. All of this money that's being raised for TV doesn't seem to matter. At the beginning of July, the end of June, the president had 2 or 3 terrible weeks, including the week where he said that the private sector is doing just fine. Then Governor Romney's had 2 or 3 of the worst weeks that anybody could imagine. President Obama didn't lose any ground in the polls. Governor Romney didn't lose any ground in the polls. I think there's about 80% of America, maybe slightly more, that's decided who they're voting for, and nothing's going to change their mind. No TV ads, no money, nothing. And the other 17, 18% is waiting. And I think the key moments are going to be the convention speeches and the 3 debates. That's when Governor Romney is going to have to spell it out, what he means. The president's going to has to talk about not just the past and pointing fingers of blame, some of what is justified, but he's got to talk about his remedy for the future and where we're going. And those 4 things, the convention speech and the 3 debates, I think are going to be dispositive. If the election were held today, I think we'd have a very strange result. I think President Obama would win the electoral vote because of the lead he has in the battleground states, but lose the popular vote. And that's not so surprising. I don't know if any of you remember, but John Kerry could have won the presidency if he had gotten 71,000 more votes in Ohio, and he would have been elected president, notwithstanding the fact that he got 3 million less votes than President Bush that day. And can you imagine listening to the right-wing radio guys after that happened? They were pretty silent when Vice President Gore got about 400,000 more votes than then Governor Bush did. But 3 million more votes, and he wouldn't have been elected president. So I think that might happen if the election were held now. But boy, there's a long way to go.
So let's switch gears to our favorite topic, business travel. We were talking for a minute backstage, and you had made a comment about your view about conferences, the importance of business travel.
I was telling Mike, when I was governor in 2010, I was chairman of the National Governors Association. I did a press conference with Willard Marriott in D.C. in which we urged governments, local, county, state governments, to resume travel. One, because it was important to the economy, important to the industry, important to all of the hotels, et cetera. But two, because those conferences have value. And they do have value, and especially if they're done right. They have tremendous value. As DA, as mayor, and as governor, I've gone to countless conferences. And I don't remember one where I didn't bring back an idea to either save us money, generate new revenue, or do things more effectively. And those ideas usually brought in about 1,000 times as much money as it cost for me and a couple of other people to go to the conference. And I think where conferences, the agenda is good, you learn stuff from the agenda, but you also learn stuff from socializing. I told Mike the story, myself and 5 mayors were just having a drink after the conference and before the big dinner. And one of them was from the Midwest, and he mentioned that they had just tried out this new substance. It was a new chemical substance, which if you put in your trucks that clean the snow, plow the snow, and it drips onto the streets, it provides essentially an antifreeze so the streets don't freeze over again. And I said, tell me what it is. And he said, you know, I'll fax it to you in the morning. And that was, we went home that morning, and by 10 o'clock, I think I got home at 9. By 10 o'clock, I had a meeting with my sanitation commissioner, my streets commissioner, my budget director, and my managing director, and I distributed them all a copy of this, and I said, I want this tested on 10 trucks as we start the winter, and if it works, I want it on every one of our trucks. It did work, and I wouldn't have found that out if I hadn't gone to a conference.
There you go.
So I think it's very, very important that government continue to do that, and not be and again, don't be wusses. we spent $11,000 to send 3 of our people to this conference, but they brought back these 2 ideas which have the potential to save us millions of dollars. So lighten up, folks, lighten up.
So, okay. Final question. So you ran a city, you ran a state, and you even ran the Democratic Party. Did you ever consider an elected job in Washington?
Well, no. I mean, I've been an executive in all of my 24 years of elective office. I don't think I could be a legislator. It would drive me crazy. I said in Buzz Bissinger's book, Buzz Bissinger wrote a book about my first term as mayor called Prayer for the City. Buzz was down with me at a hearing in Washington, and it was a frustrating hearing before the Senate Finance Committee. And I came back on the train, and he said to me, do you ever want to be a senator? I said, no, those guys don't do shit. And Buzz wrote it up in the book. I told that story in my book, and I said, fortunately for me, none of my friends in the Senate read the first book, because we did pretty well from the Congress when I was governor. And I hope they don't read this one either. So I'm not interested in being a legislator. It's not that I don't want to be president. If I woke up as president, I wouldn't resign. But no offense, is anybody here from Iowa and New Hampshire? Well, no offense to the Hawkeye State or the Granite State, but I have no interest in spending 3 years of my life in Iowa and New Hampshire. So what I would do is if someone called me and it said, I want you to be on the ticket, I would run for vice president. Let me tell you why. It's unbelievable. It's a 9-week campaign. They call you right around Labor Day and say they want you to run for vice president. The poor presidential nominee has been running for 3 years. You have to run for 9 weeks. All the money's raised. You don't have to raise any money. And if you win, you get to live in the Naval Observatory and go to a lot of funerals. I mean, it sounds pretty good. Before I go, though, I want to end, and I told Mike this. Mike doesn't forget much, but he may have forgotten it. I want to talk to you about something a little bit serious, but it ties into the book and my whole theory. And that's what happened in Aurora on Friday.
Right.
I was on television a lot on Friday, and television this morning, and television this afternoon, and I have to go do something for NBC this evening. And people say this is not the time to talk about politics, or this is not the time to talk about substance. This is a time to honor the dead. Yeah, that's true and all. But the best way we can honor the dead is to do something about this. If we had honored the dead in Columbine, maybe Virginia Tech wouldn't have happened, and Fort Hood wouldn't have happened, and if we'd honored the dead here, maybe we can prevent these from happening. Now look, if someone's crazy, there's no way you can totally prevent violence from happening. But does anybody in the audience, and if you do, I don't want you to be a wuss, I want you to raise your hand and we'll give you the mic. Anybody think that a private citizen should have the right to own an automatic rifle that has one purpose? It's constructed for combat. It is constructed to kill as many people in as short a period of time as possible. Does anybody here think that it's a good idea for a private citizen to have a magazine that is the clip that carries the bullets that feed into an automatic or semi-automatic weapon? Does anybody think it's a good idea for someone to have a magazine clip that has 100 bullets in it? 100 bullets in it? This fellow, the police estimate, fired between 50 and 60 shots in less than a minute. And the magazine, the big magazine with 100, it jammed. He used smaller automatic magazines with 33 bullets in a clip when it jammed. If it hadn't jammed, maybe more people would have been dead or injured. We don't need those to hunt. We don't need those to protect our home. There is no legitimate need for those. And you know what? For 10 years in America, it was illegal to sell, distribute, or import any of those, the automatic rifles or the clips with more than 10 bullets. It was illegal to possess, to sell, to distribute, to import them into America. That was part of the assault weapons ban that was passed in 1994. And in a terrible act of cowardice, the Congress, the assault weapons ban had a 10-year sunset, and the Congress let it expire. They let it expire without a vote, And after I talk in the book about the Gabby Giffords incident, and you remember how the nation was revolted, one, because Gabby Giffords was such a heroic figure, but two, because that little 9-year-old girl who wanted to go hear her congresswoman speak and got shot and killed by a guy, again, using a 33 bullet clip. After Gabby Giffords, the president went to Arizona and made a great speech, and he invited the family of the 9-year-old girl and the Hispanic intern who lay over Gabby Giffords' body to save her from getting killed, invited them to come to the State of the Union and sit in the president's box. The president never mentioned them that night. He mentioned everyone else who was in the box because they're invited to be sort of props for the speech. He never mentioned them. He didn't mention them the next morning. When his press secretary was asked, he said, we're going to have a press conference about gun control. And if you haven't heard about that press conference, it's because it never took place. Senator Lautenberg and Representative McCarthy both introduced bills that would have restored the ban on magazines with more than 10 bullets. Those bills didn't have enough votes to get out of committee and get to the floor. Why? Why? Something as common sense, as basic as ending a policy that's ridiculous, because they're all afraid of the NRA. They're all Democrats and Republicans. They're all afraid of the NRA. And again, it's a question of not believing that people are intelligent enough. Pennsylvania has the second highest number of NRA members of any state, behind only Texas. We're a huge hunting state. I've always been for gun control. I got elected governor in 3 statewide elections with the NRA supporting my opponents by 10%, 12%, and 21%. The 2 days after Gabby Giffords, they polled, the national polls polled the question of, do Americans want magazine clips to be limited to 10 bullets? 71% of Americans said yes, including some 58% of Republicans. And yet nobody even brought that bill to the floor. Good Lord. The NRA members, there are plenty of NRA members who are in favor of that stuff. There are plenty of NRA members who buy it who join because they want the magazine and the discounts. We've got to talk sensible. We've got to not be afraid. I mean, how many Columbines, how many of these incidents are we going to sit there and take? Would passing these laws absolutely prevent them from happening? No. But would it reduce the carnage? I believe with all my heart the answer is yes.
Governor, I mean, again, you're outspoken. And certainly at a time for all of us when a very, very difficult time. And again, a round of applause for Governor Rendell. Great to have you, sir. A Nation of Wusses, coming to your bookstore, or released now. And everyone, please, again, have a great convention. Enjoy the function tonight. And we'll see you during the week. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good night.